Sade slipping her English book into her school bag when Mama screams. Two sharp cracks splinter the air. She hears her father's fierce cry rising, falling. No, no! The revving of a car and skidding of tyres smother his voice. Her bag topples from the bed, spilling books, pen and pencil onto the floor. She races to the veranda, pushing past Femi in the doorway. His body is wooden with fright. Mamma me, he whispers. Papa is kneeling in the driveway, Mama partly curled up against him. One bare leg stretches out in front of her. His strong hands grip her, trying to halt the growing scarlet monster, but it's already spread down her bright white nurse's uniform. It stains the earth around them. A few seconds, that is all. Later, it will always seem much longer. A small gathering began to swell the house, tense and hushed. Sade stared numbly out the sitting room window to where Joseph stood nervously on guard. At each new bang, rattle or hoot, he peered anxiously through the crack between the metal gates. His head moved painfully forwards and backwards like that of an old tortoise. His fingers floundered and fumbled each time he had to wrench back the bolt. He'd been a witness. 1 second he'd been casually pushing back one of the gates so his master could drive off to work. The second, his madam lay slumped onto the ground, and a white car was screeching away through the wide avenue of palm trees. Uncle Tunde, Papa's eldest brother, arrived with a doctor. Sade and Femi huddled close to their father as he steered the doctor to the sofa where Mama now lay. Her face stared upwards to the ceiling fan, with lips parted and a tiny frown, as if there was only some small disturbance in a dream. But the flowers on the embroidered bedspread wrapped around her were drenched in crimson and told a different story. Sade clutched her brother's hand, waiting. I'm very sorry, Mr. Saloja. Your wife had no chance. Straight into the heart. The doctor pronounced the verdict in a low purr. I shall inform the authorities, and if you wish, New Era Hospital for the post-mortem. Papa, usually brimming over with words, simply nodded. His arms drew the children in tightly as a high trembling voice quivered next to him. Mama Buki's cry wailed like a lonely seabird. Sister me! Sister me! Sade's own voice was lost somewhere deep inside her. She wanted to rush across, grab hold of Mama, squeeze breath back into her before it was too late, but she couldn't move. Kneeling beside her sister, Mama Buki's tears swept over her broad cheeks as she covered Mama's face with the corner of her embroidered bedspread. Sade watched in horror, her own silent tears trapped within her like a stone. Grief burst around them like a pierced boil. All about her, Sade heard people repeat fragments of the story. Mr. Falana, one of their neighbours, and also Papa's editor-in-chief, had heard both the gunshots and the getaway car. In the deathly hush that followed, he'd peeped out from his own gate on the other side of the road. Seeing the entrance of the Saloja house wide open, he feared the worst and rushed across, followed by his wife still in her dressing gown. It was he who had helped Papa carry Mama inside. Now he had to hurry away to warn his other staff. Papa was the most outspoken journalist on Speak, one of the weekly newspapers in English, but he might not be the only target. Even before a newspaper headlines, the news would be darting by word and mouth along the pavements, highways and cables of Lagos. When the news reached Mama's friends at the hospital where she worked, there would be no end of visitors. Suffocated by arms and voices, and with the echo of the gunshots still in her head, Sade felt the urge to escape. Please. The effort was great and her voice was small, but it worked, and Sade manoeuvred her way out. Papa's study would be quiet. As she entered the study, the telephone rang. Automatically she picked it up, covering one ear to hear more easily. Is that the home of Mr. Falarin Solaja, who writes for Speak? The man's voice was perfectly clear. Yes. Don't trouble him, just give him a message. Tell him, if we get the family first, what does it matter? The voice wrung the breath out of her, like a snake secretly squeezing her throat. Frantically she signalled to Uncle Tunde, who had come to the study door. He strode across to Papa's desk, but as he reached for the receiver, there was a click. Sade struggled to repeat the horrible words. Her uncle's thick greying eyebrows lurched up over his gold-rimmed spectacles. He looked very grave. A little while later, Joseph unlocked the gates for a sleek white ambulance. The small crowd of mourners stood aside to make a pathway for the two men with the stretcher. Mama Buki led the hymn singing. Barely 2 minutes later, pressed between Mama Buki's heaving, swaying body and her father, who was silent and almost perfectly still, Sade watched them carry Mama away under a blinding white sheet. The ambulance door clicked shut. The windows were darkened glass, and Sade could no longer see even the sheet. Everyone fell quiet. The only sound was of the ambulance's motor and of Joseph grappling once again with the gates. His old body pulled to attention as the vehicle backed out, as if in a final salute. That was all. Mama was gone. Uncle Tunde led Papa gently away. The plum-coloured swirls on Papa's tunic were splattered with gashes of a deeper scarlet, their mother's blood. "Take care of the children, please," Papa murmured to Mama Buki. "I need to—" He gestured with both hands towards the clothes. Mama Buki, her eyes red and watery, shepherded Sade and Femi towards the kitchen, but as she turned to share her grief with a friend, Sade and Femi exchanged glances and wove their way back through the cluster of mourners. Sade caught snatches of phrases, Yoruba mingled with English. "Omar say oi, what a pity. Such a good woman. Evil people. He was a target. Bread of sorrow. Saved him." Sade studied her own clothes. Not a speck, not a stain on her grey school skirt and blue blouse to show what a terrible thing had happened. She ran to her room, feeling impelled to strip away the uniform. If only by putting on something fresh and new they could begin the day again. She brushed her fingers along a line of clothes, colours of sea, forests and flowers and birds. Her fingers, however, came to rest on a soft black velvet dress with a white lace collar that Mama had made for her when Papa's father died. She wanted to lie down and make everything stop, but Femi was calling. His name was urgent. "Come," he insisted when she opened the door. Grabbing her hand, he led her to Papa's study, ignoring the room with visitors. Sade fully expected Uncle Tunde would tell them to leave when they crept into the study. He was leaning against Papa's desk, in his sober black suit, the one he wore on days when he was meant to be in court. Papa often used to tease him. "Be free like me. I wear what I like to work." Uncle Tunde paused to acknowledge the children. His grey-flecked beard made his face look square and solid. It was a family joke that his hair was becoming the colour of a judge's wig. Papa, seated beside the desk in a full-length, ink-black agbada, hardly seemed to notice as they settled themselves by the untidy side table stacked with books and papers. It was usually their father whose arms, hands, even fingers danced like furious gymnasts whenever he heard or talked about things that fired him up. It was usually their uncle who folded his arms and listened. "If you're a lawyer," Uncle Tunde told Sade, "you need to keep cool and listen very carefully." But today their father's arms hung without life. It was his older brother whose arms pleaded along with his voice. "They're not finished with you, Folarin. They won't stop until they've shut you up. You know what that means. You've gone too far with them now." His father always took chances with what he wrote. He said nothing now, but Sade knew his words. "The truth is the truth. How can I write what's untrue?" Sade knew how worried Mama had been about his latest article, but Sade had never heard Mama try to stop him like Uncle Tunde did. Their uncle stretched across the desk to pick up a newspaper. One hand resting on their father's shoulder, he began to read aloud. "Why do the brass buttons who rule over us spend millions of naira sending their children to the most expensive schools and colleges in England and America? How does a soldier, even a general, acquire so much money? And what about our schools and colleges here in Nigeria? Our brass button generals shut them down when teachers complain they've not been paid, and when students still complain that they've no books. It seems they can sleep easily in their own beds, even though hundreds of thousands of our children are not being taught. What a disgrace for a country that held some of the finest universities and schools in Africa, but then our Commander-in-Chief believes more in buttons than brains." Normally Papa would have flared up. Every word of that is true, but today he was mute. His face was turned to the window that overlooked the front gate where the car had stopped. Their uncle slid the newspaper back onto the desk. You call your article Our Children's Future. What do you imagine will happen now to your own, Folarin?" Uncle Tunde stared across at the two children. Femi chewed on his thumb. Sade sensed the tightness of his body, small for a 10-year-old but tough as wire. "Mama used to say, Sade felt riveted to her chair. In all the 12 years she'd never heard her uncle or any grown-up talk like this. Normally she and Femi would have been sent outside or to another room. Nor had she ever seen Papa like this, as if his spirit had flown out from him. Uncle Tunde still did not hold back. Look, Falarin, for all we know, you are so brave, braver than most of us, but are you wise? You say our country must have writers to tell the truth, but tell me, what can you write from the grave? Scent from the pink magnolia beyond the window started to drift inside, and Papa continued to gaze quietly at the window. For goodness sake, Falarin, look at what they've just done to Ken. The whole world was shouting, Sarah Wiwa must not hang. But did His Excellency, Commander-in-Chief General Abachi and his soldiers care? Of course not. So what will hold them back with an unknown writer called Salaji? To them you're just another troublemaker. Look, if you get out of here, join Delhi in London, at least you can go on writing. Let the outside world know what's happening in Nigeria. What good is the truth on the lips of a dead journalist? And in that state you wouldn't be much good to your own children either. Femi couldn't take any more. Pushing back his chair, he ran to his father. Sade followed, as if to protect him from further attack. From the government's secret bullets or from Uncle Tunde's razor-sharp words, she wasn't sure. Papa's arms, a moment ago so listless, enclosed them both firmly. Nestling in the folds of his tunic, Sade curled her fingers through Papa's hand and was relieved to find him responding. Uncle Tunde stood watching. He said enough. Your uncle is right, the father said finally. We need to get away for a while. Grandma will hide us. We can go to the family house, Femi cried. Papa shook his head. Even family house won't be safe. These people mean business. They know our village, and I don't want them coming near Grandma. Grandma was Mama's mother. Papa paused after her name. I should have listened to your mother. So Mama had tried to warn Papa after all. Privately, out of the children's hearing. Yes, that would have been her way. And suddenly great awful sobs rose up inside Sade, shaking her and making her tremble. She heard her own strange words as she desperately sucked in gasps of air, feeling Femi stiff and silent behind her. Uncle Tunde slipped from the room, closing the door behind him on 3 fingers clasped together like survivors on a tiny raft.